and will feature a live Twitter feed. To join the conversation, share your thoughts on Twitter and use the hashtag MPC23. Please welcome Executive Vice President and Honorary Counsel of the Republic of Lithuania for Strategic Staffing Solutions, Jeffrey Nelson.
Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to introduce the Detroit Mayor, Mike Duggan, today. Yeah, thank you. With a distinguished career in public service, Mayor Duggan has been a tireless advocate for the people of Detroit since taking office in 2014. He's been reelected 3 times, and he's earned the highest approval rating of any mayor of Detroit ever. As Rochelle's video just demonstrated amply, his commitment to the city's revitalization has been evident in various initiatives that he's spearheaded, including the blight removal program, the redevelopment of the riverfront, street lighting programs, and under his leadership, Detroit has experienced significant economic growth and has become a beacon of hope to cities across the nation. Today, big companies are making big bets on Detroit. And the mayor's office, under his leadership, is doing more than providing tax incentives or expediting permits. They're acting as a real estate agent and a human resources department for investors coming to Detroit. And I was in his office recently, and he's got this great big whiteboard with statistics and issues about the serious challenges and opportunities that the city faces. And I got a chance to observe working with his team, and it struck me, the mayor's the only person that I know personally that acts more decisively or as decisively as my own CEO, Cindy, and I really admire him in the way that he leads his own team. Mayor Duggan's unwavering dedication to his community and his ability to inspire change has earned him respect and admirations from residents and leaders alike. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Mike Duggan.
Hopefully they will turn up the volume on the mic. I've managed to lose my voice the last couple days. You want to talk about one of life's cruel jokes, being voiceless at one of America's great gab fests here at the Mackinac Policy Conference. But a lot of things have changed since I stood on this stage in 2014. That year, if you were here, the entire talk was Detroit. We were in bankruptcy, highest unemployment rate in the country, hopeless blight. By the time I got from one end of the porch to the other, I was depressed with everybody who told me how bad they felt for me. A little bit different this year. But when we started, you know what happened, 40,000 vacant houses. New York Times said it was hopeless. Highest unemployment rate in the country. And when I went to recruit jobs, the experts said we're wasting our time. Manufacturing is never coming back to the city of Detroit. And then we went and landed a Stellantis plant. Jeep plant, 5,000 employees, where they said that we couldn't do it. And 4,000 Detroiters were hired through our outreach program. Right? And then GM retooled Factory Zero, where they're making the Hummer SUVs and the pickups. First entirely electric vehicle plant in the country. Ford. Bill Ford, you're going to get a chance to hear from him, bringing 5,000 jobs back downtown. And Dakota builds a dashboard plant. Lear opens a seating plant. All the things we said couldn't do. The banks moved downtown. Henry Ford expanded their hospital. Amazon hiring 1,200 people at their new fulfillment center. And Motor City Match businesses opening up in storefronts from one neighborhood to another. And 81% minority owned. We have people from Detroit starting businesses in Detroit. And with Nicole Sherrod Freeman and the Detroit at Work Center, we're making sure that Detroiters are being trained for those jobs. It's good to have the president on your side, and $100 million in adult scholarships. We are training the folks who have been long-term unemployed with literacy programs, with every kind of training that you could possibly want. And the result? Unemployment's dropped. And I came here today to brag about it a little bit. When I took office, yeah, you can clap. We were at 18%. And I look back in the 23-year history that the Department of Labor reported local city stats, the lowest was 5.4%. You couldn't do that, right? And then, of course, at the height of COVID, at 39%. And they said the cities weren't going to recover. And in April, the Department of Labor reported we're at 5.8%, the second lowest in all the years they've been reported. That's what I was going to tell you before 10 o'clock this morning. And today, the Department of Labor just released the new unemployment statistics. And at 4.2%, we just set a 33-year record. And as far as neighborhood blight, you know I've been obsessed with it, and we can see the end. We started at 47,000 vacant houses, and this year we're down to 6,600. By the end of next year, every land bank-owned vacant house is going to be gone. And we did it by knocking down 24,000, but we also sold and rehabbed 16,000. Many of these houses were beautiful brick houses, and people moved in. And last year was the tipping point I've been waiting for. We had more of our vacant houses sold and rehabbed than demolished. People are seeing the value in these neighborhoods. And you know how I love my pictures, but this is what we've done 16,000 times. House like that has to be demolished, right? And here's how it looks today. All right? Has to be demolished, right? Now I'm not talking about houses anymore, I'm talking about blocks, because now the blocks across the city are starting to look like this, and we have beautiful neighborhoods in every corner of this city today. The Riverfront Conservancy, Matt Cullen, Mark Wallace, built one of the great river walks in America. Right? Southwest Detroit, we took abandoned industrial land, built a world-class Riverside Park. Right? Taking Roosevelt Park in front of the train station and building it into Detroit's newest jewel. The fairgrounds, abandoned for more than a decade, now a place of employment and beauty. 27 miles of the worst dumping sites and abandoned railroad right away in the city, and turning it into the Joe Louis Greenway. When we talk about blight to beauty, beauty is spreading across the city. So, Detroit's recovery is done, right? I can sit down, I can end the speech. Well, we still have a couple problems. And we have one that is a ticking bomb that really does threaten everything else that we're doing. And that's our property tax system. Okay? Everybody who owns a house or has a business in Detroit, you know what I'm talking about. For more than 50 years, the property tax system has two defining characteristics. Light's rewarded, building is punished. Light's rewarded, building is punished. We've done it for 50 years, and it's how we got lots of blight and not many buildings. So you want to know how far out of whack our millage is? Troy, Livonia, they're in the 50s as far as the mills they levy. Farmington, Ann Arbor in the 60s. Ferndale, Warren in the 70s. And Detroit stands alone at 86 mills. It is far more expensive to build a house and sell it in Detroit or to do any kind of business in Detroit. And here's the worst part. We tax buildings, but there's a secret. We don't tax blight. We have an exemption built into the law. And so you look at the Hudson's Motor Plant, which known as Cadillac Stamping, was in private hands since 1986 and set vacant. Why do they pay taxes and keep it vacant for all those years? Or Michigan Central, vacant for 30 years. Continental Motors, vacant for 25 years, and the owners pay the taxes. And the Packard plant been closed for 60 years. The owners owned it and pay the taxes for 55 years. And the reason is we don't tax blight. We only tax building. Seems impossible, right? It's got to be crazy. It can't be true. I'm going to show you why it works this way. So Here's our 86 mills. And if you look at where they come from, library levies 5, county levies 17, not just Wayne County, but the intermediate school district, community college, and a number of others. Schools, 6, 13, 17. Our debt is 8 mills, and we operate off of 20 mills. That's what makes this up, and I want to talk to you today about a plan to fix it. So I'll probably tell you a little more technical stuff than you want to know, but I'm going to need your help because there are people who benefit from the fact that we don't tax blight. So why don't we just cut our property taxes? Who already thought this? We should cut your property taxes, right? You can be mayor. Why? Right? No mayor in 50 years said we should cut our property taxes. Here's the problem. 58 of the mills are outside of our control. I can't cut schools or county taxes. Detroit debt, we have started. We're paying our debt off ahead of schedule. We cut the debt mills from 9 to 8 this year. We're cutting them to 7 next year, but you got to pay your debt, which leaves us with 20 mills. And 20 mills equals the pay for 1,600 police officers. So let's say I wanted to cut 5 mills, because it is ridiculous. We lose 400 cops, but even if I cut 5 mills, we're still at 81. We're still way higher than anybody else. It wouldn't make a material difference. And for this reason, for 50 years, every mayor who sat in my seat and wanted to cut property taxes realized this isn't going to work. So, okay, we got a property tax system applies to every city. Why is Detroit complaining? Let me show you why the state system has hurt Detroit in a way that it hasn't hurt other cities. And it has to do with our unique history. So, our tax system assumes that you get taxes from 2 sources, the land and the buildings. Every assessment you get, tax on the land, tax on the buildings. But what happens if the value of the land collapses and you have 0 tax on the land, which is what's happened in the city? Now what do you do to the tax on the buildings? And the property tax system never envisioned a city where the tax on the land went to 0. But here's how it happened. In the first half of the last century, 400,000 houses built. This city built up from end to end so fast. Population grew. That's the Packard plant. The houses grew right up to that plant. They'd walk to work. But by the 50s, when Detroit was out of space, the car companies started moving to massive 1-story plants in the suburbs. It was the wave of the future. And so the multi-level plants in Detroit, where you'd have the assembly line go down 1 floor, get on a freight elevator, go to the next floor, they were obsolete. They closed. And here's the Packard plant. And what happened? People around the plant started to close. Detroit lost 200,000 people between 1955 and 1965. Whatever your assumption is of when Detroit's decline started, it wasn't after 1967. It wasn't because of Coleman Young. It was happening then. And it was producing vacant land. Because when those 200,000 people left, they didn't take their houses with them. And that's been the history of the city. And so here's your problem with the assessors. By the end of the 60s, the assessors, who are compelled by law to look at comps, vacant land was going for nothing. They had to change the assessment on the land to 0, which meant all you were collecting property taxes on was the buildings. Now you can predict what the officials did when they lost all that tax revenue from land. Got to make it up, right? You can't have schools closed. And so the 45 mills in 65 went up to 75 mills by 77, went up to 86 mills by 2000, where they still are today. And most of it was the schools. The people in Detroit loved their schools and supported them. But every time you raise the taxes, all the tax hit the building. And it made it that much harder to build in the city. And it explains a lot of what we have lived with. So that's 50 years ago. What does it have to do today, right? Home prices in Detroit are soaring today. We're leading the state in the appreciation. They've doubled in the last 6 years. But you know what the problem is? The home prices have doubled. The land is still 0. If you go out to Oakland or Macomb County today and buy a vacant lot in a neighborhood to build a house, it's $10 to $20 a square foot. That's what you pay. You want to build a house out there. Today, the vacant lots in Detroit are 75 cents a square foot. We still today have 0 value in the land. And so you all know this. Here's a house, just a standard neighborhood. I picked it out at random on the internet. $185,000 for a lot in a neighborhood in Farmington Hills, $12 a square foot. There's no $185,000 lots in Detroit. You could have all the land you want at $500 a lot. And this is the problem that I'm facing. We have a tax system that has zero tax on land. And what are you going to do if you don't change that? And the average bill on a vacant lot in Detroit, $30 a year. That's what you pay. If you want a bargain, pretty good one. So, how many vacant lots in the city of Detroit are privately owned, which means they send in their $30 every single year, because if they didn't, the treasurer would foreclose. How many of these vacant lots do you think somebody is paying $30 year in and year out? 30,000 lots. Why are people paying the taxes every year and not going anywhere near the 30,000 lots? And so because they don't go near them, in the past, the city would just let the grass grow all summer long, it'd be 4 or 5 feet high. Council and I said, we're not doing that. We're cutting them because I'm not going to have people live like this. It costs us $100 to cut these lots 5 times a year. Let me see if I follow this. These guys pay us $30 in taxes. I have to spend $100 just to cut it. I thought about billing them, but at $20 a cut, by the time we figured out where the lot line is and who owns it and stick it in the mail and collect, doesn't make any sense. As much as I hate to reward blight, it was either that or let the grass grow. And the grass isn't the worst of it, because these neglected lots are often filled with garbage and kids are growing up. And so we said, we're not going to do that. So now we spend $5 million a year on 14 crews to continually remove the illegal dumping so that we don't have this in the neighborhood, all for these guys paying $30 a year, and they couldn't find the damn lot without a map. They don't live in the city for the most part. And so, why do they do it? I'll tell you, they're 30,000 cheap lottery tickets. For $30 a year, I can hope that the Illiches or some development or something is going to go give me a check for a big payday. And it's worth $30 a year. I don't care about the impact on the neighborhood. And this is what is driving me nuts. And I'll just give you just one owner's story. Here's one owner who owns 261 lots, pays his $30 every year. See those red dots? He's figured out how to spread them around any place somebody might want to develop. He owns 22 acres. He pays a total of $6,500. He's actually sophisticated. He's closer to $25 a lot. I'm not sure how he did it, but he's figured this out, okay? And he gets a large payday, and he's landed some large paydays. But what does that leave in the city of Detroit? Who would design a system this crazy? So in 2021, one of the leaders at Wayne State looked at it and said, this is crazy. You guys need to increase the taxes on the land and cut the taxes on the buildings. So we said we weren't sure about that, so we commissioned this big study, the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, phenomenal report. You know what they said? You guys need to increase the taxes on the land and cut the taxes on the buildings. You probably all figured that out by now, right? So we're talking about changing a tax structure that's been in place for 50 years. And that means there's going to be winners and losers. And so my first point is that what we do, we're going to give people time to adjust, even those who have been taking advantage of the system. And so what we're proposing is that whether you're getting a cut or whether you're getting an increase, we want it phased in over 3 years. You'll get a third of the cost or benefit of 25, a third in 26, a third in 27. I'm not trying to mess anybody up by flipping a switch overnight, because people have made decisions over a lot of years under the old system. But here's my plan. It's really simple. Cut taxes on buildings, 30%, triple the taxes on the land. That's it, whole thing. Cut the taxes on the buildings, 30%, triple the taxes on the land. So, how do we do it? We take out Detroit's 20 mills, we take out the state's 6 mills, take them to zero, and we replace them with 246 mill levy on the land, but nothing on the buildings. It has the effect of a 30% property tax cut on the buildings. To make up for what we lose on the buildings, we triple the tax on the lands. Sounds horrible, right? How can you triple the tax on my land? Do you know what happens when we put this into place? The guy who's paying $30 a year is paying $85 a year. I'm still spending $100 to cut his damn lot, okay? So it sounds like a lot, but it really, to me, is a reasonable number. Now, if that's all there is, you might wonder about it, but let me show you now. You got a house, right? Your house just got 30 mil cut on your building, 146 increase on your land. You know where you come out now? Detroit blended together is no longer 86 mils, it's 67 mils. And, all right, make sense? A little higher than Farmington, a little lower than Ann Arbor or Ferndale, but now the homeowners in Detroit, we're in the middle of the pack. That's where we end up, and we're finally competitive. So what does this mean? This is going to be, if we can do this, the biggest building of wealth of Detroiters in history. And I'll show you why. If your house is worth $50,000, you're going to have a savings of about $463. Basically, whatever you have overall, your tax bill is going to be cut by about 25%. So $50,000 house, you're going to save $463 a year. If you got a $100,000 house, you're going to save $925 a year. If you get a $200,000 house as a homeowner, you're going to save nearly $2,000 a year off of this proposal. Now, all it does is make you competitive with Ann Arbor and Farmington, but it's a lot better than you have today. Couple pieces Detroiters will be interested. Your NEZ homeowners will be about half. NEZs are neighborhoods, which are all the nice neighborhoods that the state already gives you a half a credit. Now, your savings will be equal to everybody else. It'll only save you about half, but the difference is, to have an NEZ exemption today, you got to fill out paperwork, it expires in 12 years, you got to go through all this stuff, which is the way most of the city stuff works, right? You got to figure out who's got the program, how do I fill out the paperwork, where's the website, who would have to call at City Hall when it doesn't work. This is going to be automatic. Everybody's cut. Don't have to fill out any paperwork, don't have to apply for anything, don't have to renew it. So if you're an NEZ owner, your cut is permanent. And if you have a side lot, and we have sold 22,000 side lots in the city, your tax on that side lot is going to go from 30 to 85, just like everybody else. Now, you're going to save $500 or $1,000 on your house, so you come out ahead, but we're going to make the commitment that anybody who says, hey, that wasn't the deal, I don't want my side lot, the land bank will buy the side lot back for you for the $100 you pay. We'll take it back if you don't want it. Nobody's going to be hurt by this, but I think most people will look at this and say, I'm coming out hundreds or $1,000 ahead, and I like that swing set on my side lot. But if you don't, we'll take it. Who can possibly be against this, right? Well, let me tell you. First one, speculators in the vacant lots. They aren't going to be the maddest. The owners of the vacant commercial buildings. You want to talk about the people who are screwing over the city of Detroit? I'm going to show you who they are. Third, the owner of the scrapyards and the auto salvage yards. Because remember, what do? We today tax building, and these scrapyards and auto salvage yards are spread across the city. That's a great discount. We got no land tax. You can spread as far as you want. And owners of parking lots, and the downtown parking lot owners are going to get hit hard because, no, I'm not trying to be punitive, but I'm supposed to clap. I'm just telling you the truth. I don't have anything against them. They've kept us going. All right, so let me tell you the guys I do have something against, and it's these guys, the owners of the elected commercial and industrial buildings. And you're going to be as mad as I am in about 5 minutes. We've got nearly 1,000 abandoned commercial buildings that the owners are paying the taxes on. I want you to think about that. A vacant building in Detroit that you pay the taxes on and write the check year after year, even though you don't put a cent into it and you don't even visit it. Why do they write the checks on the 1,000 vacant buildings? And they've been abandoned for an average of 20 years. These guys are writing checks year in and out for 20 years. Who has that kind of money? Well, in Detroit, pretty much everybody does. Because why do they do it? If you let your building deteriorate, state law requires the assessor to evaluate it when it's not usable. They write the building down to zero, which means if you let your building go, the assessor has to make it zero. Now, once the building's zero, what are you taxed on? Your land's zero. The greatest deal in the world is to let the building decline. And so, it's 1,000 cheap lottery tickets. Now, we're sitting here talking in the abstract. I want you to see what's going on. And you think this just started? This is State Senator Coleman Young, his first campaign for mayor in 1973. And here's what he said on the trail. Right now, Detroit's tax structure rewards people who let their properties run down and penalizes those who build it up. Crazy, isn't it? 50 years ago. It isn't any different, but we haven't solved the problem. What I'm going to try to do this year is solve the problem. We know what the problem is. So, the reason that these buildings sat vacant for 25, 30, 65 years, they were taxed next to nothing. The buildings were declared unusable. They got taxed on the underlying land. We had to stare at this all these years because our own tax structure incentivized it. If you spent a fortune and demolished these buildings, your tax would be identical because you would have been taxed on the land anyway. Who would demolish a building? So, here's the 1,000, though, are not big industrial buildings. They are buildings that are in neighborhoods that are coming back now. So before this apartment building went vacant about 10 years ago, its taxes were $30,000 a year. Now look at those houses next door to it. We thought we'd go talk to the neighbors. We went down and talked to the lady who lived 2 doors down to see how she felt about being next to this thing for 10 years. She had some opinions about this. But here's the interesting thing. The taxes were $30,000 a year, okay? And the Patterson family's been there 30 years. They love their house. They've raised generations in this house. And they remember when that apartment building was full. They can't believe that when it cleared out, the city just let it sit there and get worse. But in 2013, it deteriorated. So you know what we did? We cut the taxes from $30,000 to $9,000. We rewarded them for neglecting their building. But we can do better than that. So in 2018, we cut it again. Since 2018, this building owner is paying $250 a year. We made the mistake of telling LaTanya Patterson her family's paying triple for the little house 2 doors down. Because why? In Detroit, blight is rewarded and building is punished. And so, in a little bit more graphic language than this, LaTanya Patterson said, this is the kind of thing that makes you want to move out of Detroit. Can you blame her? Okay? So we went and saw Marguerite Wynn, who's been in her house for 35 years. This is the story of Detroiters. They stay in these houses. They love them. Look how beautiful she has kept up her house. But for the last 2 decades, she's been next to this commercial building. That's 2009, before the Great Recession. Look what she's looking at. Look how beautiful her house is. 2011, Google Maps is a great thing. They got all these little pictures. 2011, middle of the recession. Look how beautiful she's maintained her house. This is the pride that Detroiters have in their neighborhoods, and there's a place next door. But by 2018, her house is beautiful. We've cut the taxes to $410 a year. We rewarded this owner from depressing this neighborhood for all those years. And all she wants to know is, I'm paying twice as much for my house than that big commercial building is taking. And even if you don't live next to the building, I'm telling you, beautiful neighborhoods are spreading across the city. Don't pay attention when the media says downtown, midtown, not the neighborhoods. Go off the freeway and drive through these neighborhoods. You cannot believe the number of block clubs and neighborhoods that are beautiful. But no matter what you do on your block, if somebody comes to visit you and they drive down Grand River and they pass 3 abandoned buildings before they turn on your street, what are they saying about you? And would anybody in the suburbs tolerate this? So I could do these all day. Vicki Foster, 50 years in the shadow of that 5-story abandoned apartment. It pays $330 a year. She's kept her house and she's paying triple that. Now, you can probably assume that I'm just not sitting by and taking this even before this. These people elected me. The people who stayed are the people who elected me 3 times, the ones who didn't bail out of the city. And so I've been pretty angry. And so we launched a $10 million 2-year enforcement on the exteriors of these things. And we are rolling across the city. We put the violations up. And this Katrina Crowley, boy, she's a far more interesting interview than I am. She is the meanest person in Detroit. And Katrina, it took me a long time. I personally interviewed her. She's got 100 people working for her. and she has no tolerance for anybody who doesn't keep up her business. So here's what we do. She goes out and she sees this site, team comes out and cleans it up, we send a bill to the owners. Now, I'm still trying to collect, but I'm working it. We go out and we see these rusted out fences, we give them a notice. If they don't take it down in 7 days, Katrina's team comes out, takes it down, cleans it up, we send them a bill. If you've got busted signs in the top of your building, you drive around Detroit, all these old signs, business closed 30 years ago, the signage is still there. We go in and we clean them up. We are going to clean up the exterior of 1,000 dilapidated buildings in the next 2 years. We're going to do this for all of them. All right? That's part of the blight to beauty. But when you clean up the exterior, at least it looks better. It doesn't change the underlying problem. The person who owns the building, they still ain't fixing up the inside. It's still deteriorating. When it becomes declared unused, the assessor is going to reduce it to zero. The taxes are going to go down to a couple $100 a year. It's just going to sit there looking not as bad. And so we thought, what if instead of spending all these millions of dollars to undo the damage our tax system causes, what if we actually fix the tax system? Right? No. And because I'm going to stay on this, because until we get these buildings rehabbed or gone, we aren't going to give these folks real hope. And is tripling the tax on these properties a bad thing to do? I can tell you I got 3 votes for it already when we go to the ballot. So here's the next group that's going to be heard. Scrapyards and auto yards. Because what? We tax building, but land is cheap. They spread across the city. So is that really true? Does our tax system really encourage scrapyards and auto yards? Well, I'll tell you a little bit about the city today. Today in the city of Detroit, we have 53 grocery stores. We have 16 hardware stores. We have 2 operating movie theaters. And in Detroit today, we have 452 auto and scrapyards. Do we have 450 auto and scrapyards because Detroiters needed that many more than hardware stores and movie theaters? No. We tax the hardware stores and the grocery stores and the movie theaters, but the auto and scrapyards don't build. They spread out everywhere. And there used to be 550 of them. But I realized it was so cheap, they were just starting scrapyards and auto yards on places that weren't zoned and were licensed. So I hired another team of 14 inspectors who went out and we wiped out 100 of the illegal ones. And in 2019, I issued a moratorium and said no more, which City Council has now made permanent. Because I drive down the street, I go down Joy Road, 2 weeks later I drive down, there's a new one. I finally said, who's letting these things happen? And they said, you are, you're the mayor. I said, fine, if I am, give me an executive order for a moratorium. And the damn thing stopped. They stopped new ones. But then we went back at the 100 illegal ones. And these things were all filled with scraps. We cleaned out 100. So now we're down to 452. I actually don't have great problems with the 452 left. They're in pretty good code compliance right now, or they wouldn't be there. But is this the right thing for Detroit? And so for scrapyard and auto yards, it's going to be a 50 to about 100% increase. And I'm going to pitch them to try and support us because it's the right thing for the city. And they all know if they were in the suburbs, they'd be paying 3 or 4 times that because the land value in the suburbs is so much higher. But even people who did nothing wrong, who followed the rules, put their place in the right place, and spread, I want to give them a 3-year phase-in because they aren't people that I am especially mad at. But do we long-term in Detroit want 450 scrapyards, or should we change it? And then, of course, the parking lots, you know what the story is. We have close to the most parking in a downtown area in America. Why? Because we subsidize the blight and we tax the building. These folks are going to go up a lot. And I'm going to sit with them, and I'm going to say one thing to them. If you want to keep parking cars, your taxes are going to go up. But if you want to take your parking lot and develop it, you got a 30% tax cut on that building. You're going to have a lot of developers who want to come in and build on your site. What is your future? And here's why I think the land value tax is going to benefit everybody. You do a 30% cut in taxes on buildings, we will get buildings. What the land value tax does, remember I showed you, it takes it down to the middle. I want to talk to you about new housing construction, right? People want to move to the city right now. Last year, we had 2,000 vacant homes renovated. People move in. Those houses had value. People want to be here. We had 500 new apartments open. Everybody knows this except the U.S. Census Bureau, which hasn't figured it out. But everybody else knows people are moving into Detroit. Why? Because we've got the sports teams, we've got the riverfront, we've got the activities. People want to be in the city. How many new houses built from scratch in Detroit last year? 8. Here they are. Those are the 8 houses. Hasn't been any different in the last 5 years. We've been averaging 80 a year. Now, how can this be? How can 2,000 people buy a vacant house and renovate it, but no home builder wants to build in the city? I'm going to show you. Because we subsidize blight and we tax buildings. So a home builder goes out and builds a $200,000 house. If they do it in Farmington, say they get a 30-year mortgage, 7% is probably a little higher than that, put 20% down, but you get the idea. Your monthly payment will be about $1,000 on that 30-year mortgage. $100 a month in property insurance, and your taxes will be $380. If you build a new house in Farmington and sell it, the person who buys it is going to pay $1,480 a month. But you sit down and lay out your plat map and say, I'm going to build in Detroit. Okay? Mortgage is the same. Property insurance may be a little higher, but it'll be close. But the taxes mean that the mortgage is $200 more a month. Now you tell me, what new home builder, when they're deciding what city to put their homes in, chooses the city that's going to cost $200 more a month? There's a reason we only have 8 houses a year, and it's been true for the last 40 or 50 years. We certainly have other problems in the city. I don't want to minimize that. But even to the extent we solve them, nobody's going to build when the mortgage is $200 more a month. And so, if we do the new plan under the land value tax, the payment in Farmington Hills is still going to be $1,480, but in Detroit, it's now going to be $1,510, a $30 a month difference. Haven't gotten all the way there to Farmington. Given the land price and the deal, you probably get there. But you can see what this does. You'll see homes being built on vacant lots in the city again, because we'll be incentivizing them to do that. And you can see it's going to be better to be here than in Ferndale or Warren, not as good as Livonia and Troy, but we're in the mix, which is where I'd like to be. We're also missing huge development opportunities because we have the highest commercial tax rate in America. Most national developers, they won't even look at us. We're lucky to get Stephen Ross to come back. By and large, this city's been brought back with local developers. We've been really lucky, the quality of local developers. But major cities have developers from all over the country. But you come here, and they look at 87 mills, 86 mills, and they say, you got to be kidding me. And they move on to the next city. So I know I showed you all those plants going up, all those apartments going up. Can't be that bad, right? How could I have done all that? That Jeep plant was easy, right? When I sat down with Sergio Marchione, when I heard he was going to site a new Jeep plant, I said, I want a chance to compete. And he said, don't waste your time. I said, what are you talking about? He says, I got 500-acre cornfields in 8 different states. He says, how are you possibly going to shoehorn a plant into the east side of Detroit? I said, look, if nothing else in curiosity, at least let me bid. And he said, oh, what the hell, you can put in a proposal. We put in a proposal. We made the cut from 5, we were the 5th. We made the cut to 2, we were the 2nd. Ultimately, I convinced them that they could fill their jobs. But what does it take to land a plant in Detroit? Well, all we needed to do was buy 200 acres of land. He gave me 60 days to tie it down. We had to give him the land for free. We had to set up a $27 million brownfield TIF, $50 million state contributions, get a PA 198 abatement, and resolve a huge on-site water retention. Tom Lewan is probably here somewhere who ran that plan, and we did it. Now, you have the best deal team in America in the city of Detroit. We can overcome that on an occasional basis. But you're making it really hard. And how about all these housing projects, right? You see them all over the city. They're easy. Here's Sonia Mays. She did this. Good, clap for her. She deserves it. Free lawn at Sugar Hill. Easiest thing in the world. 68 mixed income units in Midtown. Who can't build mixed income apartments in Midtown right now? It's hot, right? No problem. These guys who developed this call capital stacks, how you get your financing. If you're really lucky in the suburbs, you put in some equity, you get a lender, maybe you have 2 lenders, and your capital stack has 2 or 3 tiers to it. Sonia, on this really easy project, had to put a capital stack together of 12 levels to make this work. Okay? She had money from PNC Bank, she had money from Prudential Financial, she had money from Rocket Community Fund. She lined up 12 different groups for one $38 million deal. This is what we're doing. Donald Rencher and the housing team are phenomenal. You see these apartments going up? Every one of them looks this complicated. We don't need this kind of complication. We need development. And if you think I'm exaggerating, Sonia didn't have it worse. Last Friday, I went over and visited Dream Detroit. They've got the old Lincoln Motors plant that's right near Henry Ford Hospital, and sat with Matt Namey and Orrin Goldenberg. This has been in Matt's family since it was a paint plant 30 years ago, and he spent 7 or 8 years because he believed he could build apartments with maker space for artists and the like. After 8 years of work, he got it done. A 15-level capital stack for a $30 million project. I said, Matt, can you show it to me? I'm going to be doing this speech at Mackinac. I want to tell about it. He said, sure, I'll show it to you. And he lifted his arm. Okay? He tattooed his capital stack on his arm. Now, it really is. If you're in the suburbs and you close a deal, you go out to dinner and have some wine and you celebrate. But in Detroit, you get drunk and have it tattooed on your arm. Now, I probably shouldn't say that because I actually don't know for a fact that Matt was drunk. I just hope he didn't do this sober. But you look at what he built, and it's beautiful. But we make it so darn hard with this tax structure. And so what are we going to do? Jay Rising's our CFO. He and, there you go. Kevin Bain, Nick Allen, they've brought this whole thing up. They're a lot smarter than I am. But we're going to set some work groups right now because this affects different industries, and we don't want to just rush into this, but we're going to set up some work groups, whether you're people who have warehouses, want to see how it works, your business, how it works. We're going to need Lansing to pass this fall. We're very pleased that Speaker Joe Tate has agreed to lead the charge on this. And once you get it through Lansing, you have to go to the voters. And so we intend to go to the voters if we can get this passed in February 2024 when the presidential primary is, which means if we passed it, we could start it with the summer taxes in 2025. It means we've got to be in a tight schedule to get it through Lansing. So no matter what your business is, whether you own a coffee shop or a warehouse, whatever you own in general, you can assume that when you cut the taxes 30% and your land taxes triple, a few things. Big buildings are going to get big cuts because we're cutting the buildings, right? Neighborhood businesses get cuts. And here's the interesting thing. When I showed you the land tax is zero, the land tax is close to zero pretty much every place except out of downtown, midtown, and Corktown. Those land values have come up. But every place else, it's very small. So any neighborhood business, chances are excellent that the land tax won't increase very much. The building tax will be a cut, which means neighborhood development is what's going to be incentivized to this. The downside is businesses with excess land are going to be taxed more. If you've got parking that you need for your grocery store, we're going to give you the discount to the 60 mils. But if you've got extra land, it's going to be taxed. And so businesses that have a lot of extra land, those taxes are going to go up. We want to give you 3 years. Maybe you expand your business. Maybe you sell it to a developer. And downtown businesses are going to get hit somewhat harder because the downtown values are higher and they're going to triple. If you got a tall building downtown, you're a big winner. If you got a medium building downtown, you're probably a medium winter. If you got a small building downtown, you could get a significant increase. We don't want that to affect people unfairly. So we're going to have work groups that we're going to work through this together. In other cities, as far as we're concerned, we're happy if other cities want to participate or not. It can be a Detroit-only bill, or you can let any city opt in. Whatever the legislature prefers is fine with us. You won't find that many cities it works in because you really need cities where they deindustrialized and the land value collapsed. But from my standpoint, if River Rouge wants to do this, if Flint wants to do this, it's fine with me. So however they do it, it can apply. You won't find that most other cities this works for. But all I can say to you is this. For 50 years, nobody's been willing to take on our destructive property tax system. We can give these homeowners $500 to $2,000 a year in savings. Think about that in wealth building in the city of Detroit, what that adds up to. Because most people, the generational wealth is in their homes. And we can triple the taxes on the people causing their blight. And we can build a system where good investors can succeed without celebrating with tattoos. That's my goal. And if we do it right, this land value tax can spread beauty to every corner of the city. So we're asking for your help as we hit our Lansing legislators so that 10 years from now, there's a mayor standing here who's showing you nothing but development from one end of the city to the other. Thank you very much for your attention.
Welcome back. You are watching live coverage of the Mackinac Policy Conference.